Okay, so Ruth 4 is our text for today. And before we get started, I wanted to review a little bit and talk about Boaz a bit, because he's kind of focused on his Father's Day, and Boaz became a father with Ruth, and so it seemed important. I've done a number of funerals here at Mount Bethel, and one of the best things that I got at seminary was a list of questions by one of my seminary professors that said, you're going to have to do funerals of people you don't know. You've never met them. They might be related to a church member, or maybe they're part of the church and you get there and they die. I mean, you don't know them. And so here's a list of 14 questions that you can ask that will help you understand this person. And you know what? That's the very best thing that I got out of 3 years of seminary. Because I've had well over 100 funerals in the course of my career, probably closer to 200. And I've used those questions for every single funeral that I've had, whether I knew the person or not, because they're just good, helpful questions. And one of those questions is, if this person wanted to pass on to you one value or one lesson, or pass on to your grandchildren or great-grandchildren, or his great-grandchildren or great or grandchildren, what would that be? What's the one thing that you think, this person would want to pass on to the next generations? It's a great question. I think it's worthy of all of us to think about, what do I want to pass on, And I get, a lot of answers, but I have noticed that some of them are familiar, or not unique, but, have a common theme among many people. One of the things is family. They want to just pass on the importance of family and how tight they want the family to be, whether it be brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, children, grandchildren, all of that. One of the things is hard work, that people, of course, the builder generation, hard workers wanted to pass on that ethic of working hard and keeping at it, keep your nose to the grindstone kind of idea. A lot of folks have that. And another one is integrity. Just to be a person of integrity, to be a person of truth, to be a person that is always, honest and upright. And if I were to go back into all those descriptions, I bet those three things would come out, right near the top for almost every funeral that I've had. Boaz is in this story of Ruth, and he's a man that, I was thinking about that as I was thinking about these characteristics of Boaz, and he's a man who was generous. Some of the words that come to mind that we've talked about, he's a man who is generous. He provided for Ruth and Naomi, provided their food, their sustenance when they were widows and had nothing really in the culture. He was very protective. He took Ruth and Naomi under his wing, made sure that they were cared for and not abused. Remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about that. Naomi says it herself. She says, this kindness that Boaz is showing to us is more than we could have ever hoped for. So Boaz, to his family, to his distant family even, was just very kind. He was a man who had a good heart. And he was a man of action. We left last week with him settling a legal matter, wanting to take care of that as quickly as possible. And that's where we pick up today. But, as I was thinking about Boaz and his life, those four things are pretty good, aren't they? He's a man who was generous, a man who was protective, a man who was kind, a man who was action-oriented. He did what he said he was going to do. That's, if that was it, if that was my 10-minute sermon for today, that would be that. And that would be encouraging to all of us, wouldn't it? Because we all could be that way. But because I know that you don't want a 10-minute sermon, you'd rather have a 25, 30-minute sermon, we'll jump into the text. Maybe not quite that way. Okay, so chapter 4, Ruth chapter 4. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the family guardian he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. So here's the thing. Boaz, as we talked about last week, if you weren't here, need to review, Boaz was the family guardian. He was second in line to get Naomi's land and her family's land. And without somebody to take it, it would just go for sale and anybody could buy it. So she wanted to keep it in the family. Boaz wanted to keep it in the family. There was another man that was ahead of him in this genealogical line. And so they had to go through a legal process in order to transfer the land. Sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? Land gets transferred through legal processes. So here's the process. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here." And they did so. So they're at the city gate. Now they're having a city council meeting. Then he said to the family guardian, "Naomi, who's come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belongs to our relative, Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so, but if you will not, tell me so I will know. For no one has the right to it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it," the man says. This throws a little kink into the problem, or into the issue. So now somebody else is saying, "I will take the responsibility of taking that land." But then Boaz says, "Well, on the day you buy this land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." So you see, it wasn't just the land, but it was also Ruth now that comes with the land. And, that changes the situation a little bit, doesn't it? Because now you got another wife. I mean, how many men do you know that want another wife? Second, third, fourth. I mean, that's, whoa. At this, verse 6, the family guardian said, "Then I cannot redeem it, not because I don't want a second wife, but because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." So this is really kind of convoluted here, but I think it's important to really understand this because, it's the culture of the day. And so if this other man who goes unnamed had taken the land and taken Ruth, you see, then his whole property would have been in jeopardy perhaps. If his sons died, then it would go to this, if Ruth and this man had a child, then all of his property would go to this new child, and then his name would be lost. Does that make sense to you guys? Are you following all of that? So it's all about kind of the lineage and the heritage and following, the law and the regulations of Israel in terms of property carrying on and who gets what. And this guy says, "No way, I'm not going to put my estate in jeopardy." Now, in earlier times, and there's this little text note, verse 7, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. Take off your shoe and give it to somebody. I don't know why that is. So the family guardian said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself." And he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses." Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman. May your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." Let me say a couple of things about Boaz here. First of all, he's a man not only of the things that I already said, but he is a man of integrity. And he said to Naomi that he would take care of this matter. He acted upon it and began to take care of it right away in the way that was prescribed by the law. He didn't circumvent any legal issues. He didn't cheat anybody. He was always up front. He was always forthright. He laid it out on the line as it should have been done, and he worked through the proper channels to make it happen. I think in our day, in our culture, this type of person sometimes is hard to find. A person who is just upright and full of integrity. I have actually, not here at Mount Bethel, but I have been pastor of some individuals who have actually quit their jobs. Not labor jobs, but executive type jobs. They quit their jobs in companies because they were asked to do something unethical. They were asked to lie. They were asked to do something that was contrary to their own values. And they talked to me about it, and they would keep on, and they just finally say, I can't do this any longer. And I said, well, you don't have many options here. You either leave or you live contrary to your principles. And they actually quit their jobs. Now, I admire people like that. I don't know about you, but I admire people like that where their values and their integrity is the most important thing. And that's who Boaz is. And as, again, just kind of making that connection as fathers, men, women, mothers as well. I mean, we need to be this kind of person. We need to be people of integrity, people whose values are intact, and we don't compromise. We do things right. We do things according to the proper channels. And then we're able and willing to deal with whatever comes. What comes, comes. But we deal with it this way. The second thing about Boaz here is that, he is obviously a family man. I mean, it's so important to him that not only is this done legally or done correctly in the legal way, but that it's done, why? To provide for Naomi's family to always have this heritage of the land in Israel. I mean, he's committed to that. And he's a wealthy man, as we've already discovered. He's got his own land, he's got his fields, he's got his servants, he's got all of that stuff. But in order for Naomi to have the remembrance of her husband and her two sons continue on, I believe they thought it was in perpetuity. He's willing to take on Ruth and take on this land and be that person that makes that happen. There's a priority on family there that can't be lost. And when we remember that Ruth was also a Moabite, she wasn't even a native Jew. She was someone who had come in from the outside, which automatically made her a second-class citizen, regardless of how long she lived there. Automatically made her a second-class citizen. He was willing to take her as his wife and live in a way that would be a blessing to Naomi and to Ruth and ultimately to Israel. Okay, so he does that. He just continues to manifest the generosity and kindness and goodness of his heart. And then after he makes this purchase, I think it's interesting that the community blesses him. And it's a blessing that goes back to Rachel and Leah, who were married to Jacob. Jacob did have two wives, Rachel and Leah, and those two had the 12 sons of Israel. Those two were the reason Israel came into being as a nation. So those 12 tribes of Israel came from Rachel and Leah. And here the whole town council is saying, we hope that you become like Jacob, that your line will bear much fruit and really change the world. And they bless him in a great way. I just think it's an interesting thing. So here's the deal. Verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, And she became his wife. And when he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a family guardian. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." And then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, father of David. So Naomi was blessed by this event of Boaz taking Ruth and having a child. Ruth was blessed because she was brought into this community of faith and was able to have a son and bless her mother-in-law. Boaz was blessed because he now had a family. And guess what? Here's the purpose of the title of the sermon, the rest of the story. We're all blessed because of this event in the Old Testament. Why?
Jesus.
Because this is the line of Jesus. Right? This is the line of Jesus. Obed, the father of Jesse, Jesse, the father of David, who became the king of Israel. And it's through David's line that Jesus was born. Both Joseph and Mary were from the line of David. Remember, where did they go for the census where Jesus was born? Bethlehem. That's where this takes place, in Bethlehem. This whole story is taking place right in that area. And so, as a result, we're all blessed. And this whole story is about generosity and grace and blessing and transformation. Because remember, the big picture here is that Naomi left Israel with her 2 sons and her husband, and they all died. And she came back calling herself Mara, bitter, because the suffering and the pain was too much to bear. But God took that suffering and that pain and transformed it into not only a blessing for Naomi, but for all of us. You see, the big picture here is redemption. The big picture is one individual's pain and suffering ends up for the salvation of the world. But Naomi didn't know that. Boaz didn't know that. Ruth didn't know that. But we do. So here's the application. I got a prayer list here. There's a lot of suffering and pain and grief going on, right? There's a lot. And, really, Clyde's song, too, some of the things we wish we had told our fathers, Some of the pain we caused our fathers, our mothers, maybe our grandfathers, our grandmothers. That's there. But in the grand scheme of things, in the big picture, there's blessing. Because God takes pain, God takes suffering, God takes hurt, God takes the brokenness, and it becomes transformed. And we might not even see it. Naomi and Boaz didn't see it. They didn't know it. But it ended up to be the salvation of the world. They were integral in this whole plan of God to bring grace and mercy and peace and love and change and healing and hope to every single individual. So if we can look at our suffering, if we can look at our pain, if we can look at our hurt from that perspective, that there's something here that God can use that will make a difference in future generations, it might alleviate some of that pain and some of that hurt and give us a better perspective. There's a Bible verse in Romans 8:28 that Lisa and I have held dear whenever we have gone through difficult times. Some of you know it. God works for good in all things for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. God works for good in all things. So when something's not going right, when something's going bad, we just remind ourselves of that. God works for good in the midst of it all. If we can hang on to that, we're going to live life a whole lot better. We're going to live life a whole lot better. So have that perspective. That's what I get out of Boaz, a man of character, but also a man ultimately that God used, as well as Ruth, for great purposes, to save the world through Jesus. And that's good news, isn't it? Amen? Yeah, that's good news. Let's pray together. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, we thank you for this story of Ruth. And we thank you this morning for all three of those major characters, Naomi and Boaz, Ruth, the lessons that we've learned, God, the steps of faithfulness that they took and the steps of faithfulness that we can take. Lord, I would pray that you kind of give us a big picture. All those things that concern us, all those things that burden us, God, just help us to see them as avenues by which we might experience even greater blessing, or that the world might even experience greater blessing. And always, always, always give us that faith that does recognize that you take whatever we experience and work some good out of it. And give us eyes to see and spirits to perceive and hearts to understand how that all works. And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. I thought